My name is Steve Major. I'm going to be doing the moderation for the session. The first presentation is going to be a tag team with Suzanne Fitzpatrick and Pascal Fouchiatsma, who were both introduced last session, so I'm going to do that again. This is the method workshop session, and Dennis Culhane, who is also on the program, is a last-minute scratch. He will not be presenting. So we'll have more time for the rest of us, and I'm going to use that.
Thank you. I will be trying to speak loudly and slowly for the benefit of the translators, so sorry if it seems a bit stilted otherwise. Volk and I are giving a joint presentation on the use of household surveys to measure past experience of homelessness. I'll start off by giving a little bit of introduction to why we think this is a useful method, and say a little bit by way of illustration about experiences of using this kind of method in the UK, before Volker talks about some very recent work that he and colleagues in Piazza have been doing to promote the use of this method in Europe. So, why do we think household surveys are a useful way to look at homelessness? The argument here for us is a standard set of retrospective questions, and in other words, questions that ask people about their past, in general household surveys, is a very helpful way to get at some aspects of homelessness. And these large-scale surveys are usually conducted by census or other official authorities, and they allow you to do several things. They allow you to estimate the overall incidence or prevalence of past experience of homelessness. As Dennis mentioned briefly in the introduction, you can ask people in these general representative surveys, have you ever been homeless? Have you been homeless in the last 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? As we'll go on to say a little bit more about, as Dennis already alluded to, it can be very helpful not to use the word homelessness itself, although it tends to be used in one of the examples we're giving, but to ask about objective housing circumstances as well as actually asking people have you been homeless, because of course that's then filtered through people's own definition of homelessness. But it does allow you to estimate the overall incidence. It allows you, crucially, in my view, to analyse its social distribution. This is because these household surveys typically gather at individual on household level a range of other demographic and social and economic data, and that enables you then to look at the distribution within the population of the experience of homelessness or particular aspects of homelessness that you're interested in. It also, and this is perhaps what is the greatest relevance to this particular event, is if these questions are asked in a relatively, or in a very standardised way, in a consistent way, then they can be used as a basis for international comparisons. And that's very much what Volker will be talking about in the European context. And actually has been an agenda that a number of us who are in the room have had for probably about the last decade now. Dennis is nodding, Stephen Gates, I'm not sure if he's here from Canada, and colleagues from Australia and elsewhere. We've all been trying to get our census and other authorities to ask some standardised questions in household surveys so we can compare across countries. And I know we'll be hearing from Paul Toro in a little while about the methods he's used with a similar objective. So the advantages of this kind of method is cost efficiency. You're piggybacking on an official survey that's already, or a general household survey that's already taking place. So you can benefit from the large sample sizes and rigorous design of those surveys. And as I've already said, it allows you to link the experience of homelessness to individual household, and actually what we tend to find very helpful, area characteristics. If you can link that individual level data to ward level, as it's called in the UK, a small scale, geographical locations, but even local authority or other larger scale areas, it allows you then to look at the incidence of homelessness in different labour market, housing market contexts and so on. And finally, what it allows you to do is reach what might be called some hidden homeless groups. In other words, people who might have experienced homelessness without being sleeping rough or being unsheltered in visible places in the kind of the sort of high priority places that Dennis was talking about. You might have experienced that homelessness, but not in a way that's countable through those point in time and other counts. And you might not be in touch with homelessness services, so the registry-based methods won't capture you either. So it's a different route in. It's certainly not going to give you the answers to every aspect of how one might want to measure homelessness, but allows you to explore a range of important aspects of homelessness, particularly among those people who might not otherwise come to the attention of the methods that we use. The disadvantages, well, the first one is obvious. It by definition excludes, because they're private household surveys, it excludes people who are not living currently in private households, and that means that it won't capture many people who are currently homeless. It does depend on your definition of homelessness. I mean, certainly in the UK, we use, for some purposes at least, people who are what are called doubled up, living with other households. They can be captured using large-scale household surveys, but people sleeping in the streets or in other institutional settings, in homeless hostels, shelters and so on, will not be captured. And that also means the long-term homeless will be underestimated using this kind of method, because unless they've moved back into the private household population, they won't be covered. So it's very useful in some ways, but of course it has to be complementary to other sorts of methods, the kind of methods that Dennis was outlining in the section. Just to give you a kind of example of how this kind of method has been used, there are some examples that go back quite a long way actually in the UK. The Survey of English Housing, which was a national level household survey in England, just in 1 year only, 1994-95, asked a single question on homelessness. There's a lot of talk about homelessness these days. Can I just check, in the past 10 years, would you say that you've been homeless? That's the one question that they asked. There was a very interesting article came out of that, analysing the social distribution of homelessness in England, based on that single question, because we could link it with lots of other data that survey collected. Now, there's various critiques one can make of that work as well, but it was a first indication of the power of this kind of method. More recently, but still in the UK, the Scottish Household Survey, which is a large-scale survey in Scotland only. Bear in mind, Scotland's a country of a bit less than 5 million people, and this is a biannual survey of 10,000 households a year. They combine data to make the sample sizes larger when they publish it. So it's a continuous biannual survey, 10,000 households, and in a number of years, the analysis I'm talking about is 2005 to 2008, but I think it's in 4 or 5 separate years they've asked questions. In fact, a suite of 15 questions about homelessness, so we have quite a lot of data about homelessness in Scotland. Always in Scotland, we have more data than anywhere else. It's Mackie from Wales is nodding about that. But at UK level, we don't have anything quite equivalent to the Scottish Household Survey data on homelessness, but we do have something called the UK Poverty and Social Exclusion Survey, which is a smaller scale survey, 6,000, for the purposes of what I'm talking about today, taking into account missing data and so on. So it's a survey of 6,000 people across the UK. It's a subset of a larger survey called the Family Resources Survey in the UK. And it's a one-off survey in 2012. It's got a boosted sample of low-income groups, and it asked a set of questions closely modelled on the Scottish Household Survey questions in 2012 on homelessness across the UK. The actual, so the Scottish Household Survey, well, I say it's closely modelled. They didn't ask the full 15, this full suite 15 questions, but they did ask most of them. Scottish Household Survey is a very large sample size. I mean, for the purposes of what I'm talking about today, our sample size is 36,000 in a country of 55 million people, because we combine data from several years. I say for the Poverty and Social Exclusion Survey, the sample size is smaller, but it's still a 6,000 sample. And both include both subjective measures on homelessness and objective measures. So they ask, have you ever experienced homelessness? That is, lost your home with no other accommodation to move to or to go to. In the Scottish Household Survey, they then ask, has this happened to you in the last 2 years? In the Poverty and Social Exclusion Survey, they ask, has this happened to you in the last 5 years? But separately from that, and picking up a point that Dennis made in the plenary, they also ask a set of objective questions about specific housing problems, circumstances that at least quite often in the UK are considered to constitute homelessness, both in terms of mainstream policy debates and certainly academic debates. So they ask specifically about rough sleeping, they ask specifically about staying in temporary accommodation, and they ask about applying to the council as homeless. This is because in the UK local authorities have duties to rehouse certain categories of homeless people. So one of the questions we ask is about whether you've applied to the council as homeless. I'm not going to go into the detail of all of that, but I just wanted to give you a bit of a flavour of what has emerged from some analysis we've done. This is based on the Poverty Social Exclusion Survey. We've actually done a lot of analysis of Scottish household surveys and more detailed paper, because this is UK-wide and we only have a brief slot today, I've just used the PSE data. What you can see there is just the basic descriptive distribution of the past experience of homelessness in the UK based on those questions I outlined. So as you can see, in England, almost 1 in 10 people say that they have ever experienced homelessness. Now, when the question was asked about in 94-95, have you experienced homelessness in the last 10 years, it was 4.3% who said that they had. So, you know, these are not 9%, so these are kind of all, you know, it makes sense, they're of the same magnitude. You can see it's higher in England than it is in the other UK countries. And we've got some reasons for that, which we think are about the housing market. And you can also see that have you been homeless in the last 5 years? Again, you get a similar pattern. England highest, Scotland second highest, although Wales and Northern Ireland reverse positions on that, but they're certainly lower than England, which consistently comes out highest. And sub-regionally, the south of England, where the housing market is most, there's the most ferocious competition in the housing market, comes up much higher than the other regions. We also ask, as I say, what's closer to probably the sort of definition for IGH we're talking about today. Have you, in terms of the objective questions, have you slept rough in the last 5 years, or have you used temporary accommodation in the last 5 years? Of course, the numbers are smaller again, because this is quite, from a UK perspective, this is a narrow definition of homelessness, the definition of literal homelessness, rather than taking into account applying to the council as homeless, doubling up and so on. It's just rough sleeping and use of temporary accommodation. But again, you get a similar pattern where England is higher than the other countries. We've also done some multiple regression analysis to see which characteristics are associated with a higher risk of past homelessness, other things being equal. And what we found is that being young is very, there's a very sort of strong independent effect of being young, both in terms of reporting homelessness in the past 5 years and indeed in the past 2 years. The Scottish Household Survey data, the old Survey of English housing data, every single data set tells exactly the same story on this. If you're young, you're much more likely to see you've experienced homelessness in the last few years. But perhaps more surprisingly, you're also more likely to have experienced homelessness ever, which of course doesn't seem logical, because the older you are, the more time you've had to experience homelessness. But it is a very consistent finding, and it could be, I think, partly a cohort effect. The current cohorts of younger people are more likely to experience homelessness than older people. Certainly once you're over 45, the chances of you saying you've ever experienced homelessness go down quite dramatically. Over 60, it's very rare. Some of it might be about understandings of the term, or it might be because it's something you tend to experience when you're young. Your memory is fresher of it when you're asking a question when you're younger. But whatever the explanation is, it's certainly associated with being younger. Other ones, perhaps less surprising, ethnic minorities, but only some ethnic minorities, Black and Afro-Caribbean, not Asian ethnicity, is associated with a higher risk of homelessness. Being a social or a private tenant rather than a homeowner is associated with a much higher risk of homelessness, past homelessness. Being a single person or lone parent household, much higher. Again, this is all very consistent with data across Europe, such as it is on these matters. Having a long-term illness, sickness, material deprivation at an individual level. We have some economic deprivation variables, but also living in a deprived neighbourhood very much increases your risks of having experienced homelessness, and living in an urban area rather than in a rural we've published a small amount, that sort of basic table and some description around that's already been published in the UK. We do a homelessness monitor series in the UK, and the English monitor for 2013 we reported on that. But we are in the process of doing a more detailed analysis of the Scottish Household Survey for an academic paper. So that's still a bit of a moving feast for us at the moment. And but just a bit of a flavour of, I think, some of the things you can do in your hand.
And I'll be quite short. It's just about in Fianza. Fianza is the European group of organizations, national organizations working with the homeless, and the European Observatory on Homelessness. We have tried for a long time to get Eurostat, that's the European Statistical Authority, to get them to include a retrospective question in, and that's the last acronym, SILC, which is the European Union Statistics on Income and Living Conditions. It's a recurrent household interview survey in all EU member states, so it would be perfectly placed to have that across all the 28 EU member states. The policy framework is that there's a social investment package which asks member states to develop homelessness strategies. There were a number of calls by the European Parliament, by a number of different European committees to develop these strategies. Homelessness is an ongoing priority of the so-called Social Protection Committee. They have an indicator subgroup where always the question comes up how homelessness develops. And half of the European member states have homelessness as a priority of their national homelessness programs. There's a joint assessment framework for European semester, including homelessness, but there are no data, so no indicators. So the General Directorate of Employment and Social Affairs, they made a commitment to revise the EU SILC housing module to focus on homelessness as well in the next period. It was not easy to convince the statisticians to do something like that. There are still doubts to do it. We have revised several times our definition to please them, to reduce it, to make it more feasible, and came up at the end with this proposal. The question would be, in the past 6 years, because this module will come up every 6 years, have you had to live in any of the following situations? Yes or no? Sleeping rough or sleeping in public spaces, staying in emergency or temporary accommodation, such as night shelter, a women's refuge, a hostel or a hotel room provided for people who are, and that's the only time where homelessness comes up, or staying with friends or relatives temporarily so as to avoid sleeping rough, sleeping in public spaces, or staying in emergency or temporary accommodation. These are the three definitional items. And some very few follow-up questions like what was the main reason, or the second main reason for having to live in one of the situations described, and something on the length of time people have experienced this situation in the last incident. So in May this year we were in Luxembourg to discuss that again. And the Eurostat Task Force on Past 2020 is now willing to test a retrospective question on homelessness in 2017 as an optional variable. They are testing it. We are not knowing if they really do it. There are problems which were discussed. One of the biggest problems is finding a consensus about the definition again. And the second, because they were especially debates about the double gap question, and the other question was, is a sample size large enough to get reliable proportions, because the rate will be something like 1% or 2%, rather small for such a household. In our view, implementation of such a question into EU civil would be a major breakthrough, although long-term homeless people, as Suzanne said, would be largely excluded, and some others, some people directly living on the streets at the moment. They cannot be included in a household sample, but people who know the Eurostat EU Silk system, every year a new cohort is coming into the sample, so there are quite some chances to people being included even if they have been homeless before. As I said in plenary already, the census attempts to enumerate homelessness in Europe has largely failed. It has made some progress in some of the countries like Poland or some Eastern European countries. There was first time that authorities tried to enumerate homeless people, but they are now discussing the recommendations for the 2020-something census, and we already got a reply by authorities that it will be even harder in the next census to get homeless people included, because it will be more and more register-based, and homeless people are usually not registered, or it's only a very small proportion who is registered, like having no fixed abode. So the retrospective question would provide comparable data for the first time on a European level across all 28 member states. It would be fantastic possibility also for international comparisons, even if there are still differences in definitions and in the prevalence period, but I think it would be a great step forward, and it would be wonderful if we get more of this. It's relatively easy, as Suzanne said, it's relatively cost effective, and it would be a good way. We would get other numbers, of course, because it's a longer period, but it would be great for that.
Why do you think it would only be 1% when it's 9% in Britain, when the same with 1 year left?
It's a 6 years period. It's a long. It's not 10 years and not the.
There's 5.
We were saying like 10 years, so it depends on the definition. You see, if you look at the narrow definition, like lost sleep in contemporary accommodation, it might be more like 2% in 6 years.
They have doubled up.
Well, they're arguing about whether they're going to include doubled up in it.
Yeah,
so it
And you
depends.
didn't have doubled up.
We did. I mean, the term we use is whether you stayed with friends or relatives because you didn't have a home of your own. So effectively, yeah, that's our way of articulating doubled up. But not. But sorry, the figures I gave was on the subject question: have you been homeless ever? So that was people's own definition. The objective data I gave you was on the narrower definition. So I haven't actually the data I present is actually quite conservative. I've not presented the fullest objective data.
Yeah. I mean, the lifelong prevalence is, of course, giving you the biggest rate, but it's also, for policy purposes, the less useful, because you can't measure any input of policies. So 6 years is still a long period. It's long enough to cover, to be feasible to cover homeless people. And it's also short enough to cover at least some policy effects. That was one of the
in the US, we have programming through our schools for children who are homeless, and they can register as either unsheltered or living with family and friends. And does anything like that exist? So we get annual then counts by school and school district and state of what's happening with homeless families, because there's specific programming for those children. I don't know that.
Is it the schools, the teachers, or whoever?
Well, so like a school social worker would be dedicated as a homeless liaison, but they do, 3 jobs.
You have to be aware that in some of your European countries, homelessness families is quite a very small proportion. Most of the homeless population in Europe would be single people. I mean, there's still, it depends on the definition of the legislation. There's a large number of homeless families in the UK, how they are formulated with the primary need legislation, but many, especially in northern countries, you will find very few families with homelessness.
They get how-
Because
they get
it's
how-
stronger than
I'm gonna ask if we can keep general questions for the end. If there's any like technical clarifying questions, feel free to ask. But there'll be time for those kind of questions at the end.
In the UK, because we have the statutory homelessness system, both authorities report on homeless families as the housing authority because they have to take responsibility for them. So we have quite large numbers recorded. But because that's a prevalence count, it's the number who are accepted as homeless over the course of a year, or the number who are in temporary accommodation at a certain point in time. It's incommensurate with homeless and other forms of homelessness stats. So
It's very special.
Yeah. Well, precisely, I mean, the numbers of homeless families in Germany and Finland and so on is close to zero in terms of longer term. So it's a very, very different context when we're talking about in the States. And it is, we think, to do with the welfare system and the housing system and such on. And it makes more of a difference to the family homelessness than it does to single homelessness. Because that's what it is.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Flavia.
Bueno, buenos días. Efectivamente, mi nombre es Isabel y mi apellido es Lacalle, lo cual hace bastante que haga mucho sentido también el festejo. Hoy día vamos a contar un poco sobre la experiencia que ha tenido Chile en cuanto a la medición y al catastro. Primero que nada me gustaría poder partir con la definición que en Chile utilizamos para personas en situación de calle para poder contextualizar. Dentro de esto entonces nuestra tipología se divide en dos. Primero tenemos a aquellas personas que pernoctan, que duermen en lugares públicos o privados y que no cuentan con una infraestructura que pueda ser caracterizada como una vivienda. Esto excluye a las personas que están viviendo en campamentos, en asentamientos. Y en esta parte de la tipología podemos identificar a las personas que viven en la vía pública. Y luego la segunda son aquellas personas que carecen de un alojamiento fijo, regular y adecuado, entonces encuentran residencia nocturna en algunos lugares, ya sea aportando monetariamente o no. Y dentro de esto podemos encontrar entonces los albergues, refugios de invierno, residencias, casas compartidas, hospederías, ya sean solidarias o comerciales. El catastro del año 2011 fue la segunda experiencia de un catastro nacional en Chile. La primera experiencia se llevó a cabo el año 2005 y tuvo que ver con una demanda de la Red Calle, que es la red de organizaciones que trabajan con experiencias vinculadas a personas en situación de calle. Hubieron varias, al ser el primer trabajo tuvimos varias deficiencias y varias dificultades. Este trabajo se hizo durante una noche. Se pudieron hacer previamente mesas regionales y una mesa nacional para poder coordinarse, pero se involucró a la policía, estuvo muy presente. Y como lo decía anteriormente el colega, fue algo que afectó mucho, ya que la gente tiende a desaparecer mágicamente producto de la policía con los trafecos. Los encuestadores también fueron voluntarios y se logró identificar aproximadamente a 7.200 personas. Luego, en el año 2011, la necesidad surge más que nada para poder obtener datos concretos y poder interceder en las políticas públicas. Después del año 2005 pudimos efectivamente lograr una política pero que fue algo muy mínimo y con un porcentaje bastante deficiente a lo que esperaba. En el año 2011 entonces se decide poder hacer este censo para poder saber cuántos son, quiénes son y dónde están. Esa era nuestra premisa. Dentro de esto entonces vemos que el primer criterio que debemos de tener en cuenta es definir si esto es un censo de hecho o un censo de derecho. El año 2005 entonces podemos ver que hicimos un censo de hecho donde solamente se incluye a las personas que están presentes en el minuto que va el encuestador. Los censos en cambio de derecho incluyen a las personas que habitualmente viven en ese lugar. En cuanto a esto, entonces, el censo de derecho, que es lo que nosotros escogimos, que vemos que refleja mejor la realidad, tiene un riesgo bastante importante, que es poder tener un doble conteo, ya que dentro de las recomendaciones está que se realiza además por varios días. Entonces, este fue el último fue el que escogimos en Chile para el censo del 2011. Dividimos el trabajo en 3 etapas. La primera etapa fue una etapa de coordinación y de gestión que se llevó a cabo a través también de mesas regionales. Chile tiene 13 regiones, se hizo una mesa en cada una de las regiones. En estas mesas participó la policía, participaron los servicios, participó la policía, pero luego para el día que lo hicimos estuvo vinculado desde más atrás, para no estar presente, para que las personas no desaparecieran. Estuvieron los servicios gubernamentales que trabajan con menores, con jóvenes, con adultos. Estuvo servicio gubernamental que trabaja con temas de consumo. Había ONGs locales, el Servicio Nacional de Estadística, los municipios y la academia. Hubieron 2 universidades que estuvieron presentes. Una de ellas fue quien licitó el programa del catastro, ya que fue un concurso público abierto, y fue una universidad la que tuvo esto y otra universidad que tiene un centro de políticas públicas. Además de haber realizado estas mesas regionales, se realizó una mesa nacional, que esta mesa nacional cumplió un rol muy activo, ya que tuvo que coordinar además a todos estos organismos que estaban a nivel territorial. Y esta mesa estuvo a cargo de probar el instrumento, de verificarlo y de poder hacer las coordinaciones a más grandes rasgos. Entonces, claro, una cosa que para nosotros es muy importante relevar, entonces, y que tal vez seré majadera en aquello, es la alianza que se realizó entre sociedad civil, Estado y academia, que es algo que no lo habíamos tenido anteriormente. Y esta mesa entonces también tuvo dentro de sus desafíos el poder empadronar y levantar los puntos calles. Identificamos como puntos calles todos aquellos lugares, ¿no es cierto?, donde pernoctan las personas. El catastro tuvo una ventaja también, ya que se hizo durante el invierno, y en el invierno ese era el primer año que estaban abiertos los centros financiados por el Estado para combatir las muertes producto del invierno. Entonces, eso también fue de bastante utilidad para nosotros. En esto entonces pudimos, gracias al trabajo de la ONG, más que nada de la sociedad civil, se pudieron encontrar 2.129 lugares distintos donde dormían las personas. Y entonces con esto pudimos acotar el trabajo a identificar solamente 160 comunas de Chile, como de las 346 que existen. Y eso lo realizamos teniendo solamente a las ciudades que tenían más de 20.000 habitantes. Fue con ellas con las que se trabajó. Entonces, bueno, con esto identificamos entonces nuestro marco muestral. Dentro de la segunda etapa, donde ya teníamos la certeza que íbamos a hacer un censo de derecho, bueno, una vez más, en el tema del por qué esta alianza es tan importante, podemos ver, por ejemplo, el rol clave que jugó este triángulo, ya que la academia fue quien diseñó el instrumento, el Estado tenía la responsabilidad de levantar la información, o sea, el Estado tenía la responsabilidad de realizarlo, pero la sociedad civil fue quien levantó la información. Bueno, el cuestionario que nosotros se realizó fue un cuestionario que tenía 35 preguntas, que duraba aproximadamente entre 20 y 25 minutos cuando uno no tenía interrupciones. Y se basaba en 7 áreas. Dentro de esta está la trayectoria en calle, las estrategias de subsistencia, las redes, educación, salud y datos de identificación. Los datos de identificación eran mínimos, ya que nunca las respuestas, cada una de las encuestas fue anónima y las personas solamente respondieron las iniciales de sus nombres y el año de nacimiento. Porque también sabíamos que las personas podían tender a no querer dar respuesta, y pasó en el censo anterior con la presencia de la policía, pensando que queríamos, el Estado luego quería utilizar las bases de datos para otros fines. En cuanto a los niños también, el caso de los niños se tuvo que extender el tiempo en el cual se realizó este conteo porque hubieron temas particulares de la contingencia país, ya que había muchos policías en las calles. Justo durante ese tiempo tuvimos grandes, que más o menos los seguimos teniendo, temas con la educación, por lo cual había muchos policías en las calles. Entonces los niños desaparecieron. Y asimismo fue una semana de extremo frío en Santiago, lo que para los adultos fue muy bueno porque estaban abiertos todos los lugares del plan invierno que financia el Estado, pero para los niños esto hace, como van a ser registrados en estos lugares con sus nombres, hace que también se pierdan un poco. Entonces, básicamente del trabajo en terreno tenemos que el catastro tuvo 6 días de trabajo. Los conteos se realizaban 2 veces al día, a primera hora por la mañana y a última hora durante la noche, entendiendo que durante el día somos todos los que estamos en la calle y queríamos identificar quiénes son los que duermen. Entonces por eso escogimos esos 2 márgenes de tiempo. Quienes aplicaron el catastro fueron voluntarios en cada una de las 200 sedes que se levantaron a nivel nacional. Entonces, cada persona que iba a realizar una encuesta tenía que salir desde esta sede y regresar a esta sede con los instrumentos. Se identificaron 12.255 personas distintas en todos estos puntos calles que se levantaron. Lo que, yo creo que para algunos está un número bastante amplio, pero para otros creemos que es bastante menor a lo que es la realidad. Y estas 131 comunas que se escogieron del país representan el 86% de la población, por lo tanto fue con esta identificación de realizarlo solamente con las ciudades de más de 20.000 habitantes. El riesgo que mencionaba anteriormente es el tema del doble conteo. Que es un riesgo conocido cuando uno extiende en el tiempo, y para esto pudimos establecer 2 estrategias. La primera estrategia era durante el proceso del encuestaje, que a cada persona que se le realizaba la encuesta se le daba una tarjeta que tenía el número de folio de la encuesta del cuestionario que él respondió. Entonces, entendiendo, y también como conociendo el comportamiento de las personas en situación de calle en Chile, que tienden, las cosas que son importantes están todas muy bien guardadas. Entonces, esta tarjeta fue una buena estrategia en ese sentido. Y en cuanto a el catastro también, el cuestionario, el instrumento tenía la primera pregunta y la última, mencionaban si es que había respondido este cuestionario anteriormente. Entendiendo que hay veces que muchas personas, cuando les hacíamos la primera pregunta, nos decían no, pero luego de haber respondido todos los 30 minutos, nos decían y le hacíamos la última pregunta, decían sí lo respondí. Entonces, si tenían su tarjeta con el folio, identificábamos el folio para luego poderlo eliminar cuando ya tuviéramos la base de datos. Y la segunda estrategia fue al finalizar, cuando ya teníamos hecha la digitalización. Lo que se hizo ahí fue poder hacer un cruce con las iniciales que habíamos pedido anteriormente en las preguntas de identificación y también que tenían que ver con el año de nacimiento. Entonces ahí se realizó un filtro bastante importante que también redujo las dobles. Y la tercera etapa tiene que ver con un estudio de caracterización que se hizo, que fue, yo creo que algo bastante privilegiado que pudimos realizar, ya que más que saber quiénes son y dónde están, queríamos saber además cómo estaban, y eso lo pudimos llevar a cabo con este estudio de caracterización. Ahora, este estudio se utilizó como marco muestral el mismo catastro, hecho justamente antes, y se utilizó un enfoque más cualitativo y etnográfico. Se aplicó a una muestra representativa de la que se levantó en el catastro y se hizo por edad y por lugar donde estaban habitando. Y esto lo dividíamos en calles, hospederías, albergues o personas que estaban arrendando. Y este estudio tuvo 4 etapas, tenía entrevistas individuales, entrevistas grupales, relatos de vida y observación etnográfica. Dentro de las 3 etapas que tuvimos, dentro de la parte técnica de este estudio de caracterización, se generaron 42 estratos de cruce entre los puntos de calle que mencionaba anteriormente. Se ordenaron luego por tamaño y se terminaron seleccionando por saltos sistemáticos. Entonces esto identificamos que en los puntos que habían menos de 20 personas se los encuestábamos a todos y en los que habían más de 20 personas se escogía aleatoriamente por salto sistemático. Se encontraron para este estudio de caracterización 1851 casos. Queríamos nosotros establecer 1400, pero se dieron más. Y la encuesta contaba con 11 módulos, 130 preguntas finales, lo que pudo arrojarnos 665 variables. La clave del éxito, que creemos que fue algo que nos permitió tener este proceso, una de ellas fue la celeridad, ya que las 3 etapas fueron en un corto tiempo, más o menos, ya que la primera etapa de la coordinación se comenzó en abril, la gestión directa con las mesas regionales y nacionales, el catastro en sí se realizó en agosto, y la tercera etapa del estudio de caracterización se realizó hasta noviembre del mismo año. Por lo tanto, los puntos calles no cambiaron mucho, pudimos también derribar el mito que dice que la gente tiene mucha movilidad, ya que estuvieron presentes casi en los mismos puntos calle. Y lo otro de nuestras claves del éxito es el Time Location Sampling, que es este modelo de muestreo que permite recolectar información de poblaciones difíciles. Y nuevamente, como creemos que parte de la clave de este éxito fue el conocimiento que tenían la sociedad civil, a través de las ONG y los servicios locales para hacer el levantamiento de los puntos, ya que fue fácil dentro de todo encontrar a las personas luego de estos levantamientos de puntos, identificación en hojas de ruta, y luego se les entregaba a las personas que iban a encuestar ya identificadas. Y bueno, yo creo que esto es más importante también de nuestro éxito en términos de que logramos conseguir 9.000 voluntarios a lo largo de Chile que hicieron todo este trabajo. Fueron personas que en su mayoría tenían vínculos previos con personas en situación de calle. Y básicamente, bueno, hicimos una convocatoria bastante planificada a través de registros web, a través de redes sociales, de presencia en medios. Hubo mucha motivación para eso y se hicieron capacitaciones para todas estas personas. Las capacitaciones duraban 4 horas y logramos que todas las personas pasaran a capacitarse. Y aquellas personas que tenían este vínculo previo con personas eran jefes de cuadrilla. Entonces luego organizamos a los voluntarios de a 4 o 5 personas con un jefe de cuadrilla. Este jefe de cuadrilla era quien ya tenía la experiencia previa del trabajo en calles y también quien manejaba la hoja de ruta con los puntos identificados. Bueno, como comentaba antes que había sido una dificultad para los niños, el tema de que en Chile esa semana estuvo muy difícil, muy dura. En cuanto al invierno, significó que todos los albergues estaban llenos, entonces fue de mucha utilidad. Y bueno, yo hablo todo el tiempo de situación de calle porque en Chile identificamos nuestro concepto como no condicionando a la persona, por eso no hablamos de de condición de calle, de sinogarismo. Hablamos de que la persona está en una situación transitoria. El resultado de nuestro catastro es una publicación, que justo la tiene Susana en la mano. No, esta es una publicación que pudimos realizar, bueno, está en español, pero tengo algunos ejemplares por quienes estén interesados en ella, que pudo sobre todo derribar muchos de los mitos que existen en cuanto a esta población. Y eso es todo. Muchas gracias. Do answer questions now?
Afterwards, so,
Okay, so I'm going to talk about some of the work that I've done. I'll say at the outset, the work that I'm doing here to estimate prevalence of homelessness across nations does use, a household survey method. The difference between what Volker and Suzanne presented and what I'm going to present is that in my case, I'm not piggybacking on any broad national survey. I'm doing.
Just a bit slower.
Oh, okay. Sorry, we have a few extra minutes. In my case, I am basically controlling the methodology. I've worked with different colleagues in these 11 different nations, and together with them, we designed a sampling design, we translated the measure, we trained the staff. So I have a lot of control across nations, and I think it's worked out pretty well that way. So Dennis already presented this, so I'll skip through. I'm going to talk about the large scale household surveys, but let me talk about a few other advantages and disadvantages that haven't come up yet of these other methodologies. So the point in time estimate, this is the one that most people think about. If you say, well, how are you going to estimate the prevalence of homelessness? Oh, let's go out and count them tonight, right? That's sort of the obvious way to do this job, right? But there's some big problems, and we should always be aware there's some big problems with this methodology. For one thing, it's estimating point prevalence only. And I would argue that point prevalence is useful for some things. So for example, you want to know how many shelter beds you should have in your community. Well, point prevalence is good for helping you make that determination on how many shelter beds. But for many other things, it's not useful. Because homelessness, we know, exists over a time span. It's not how many people are homeless tonight, it's how many am I going to see in a year's time. Because I have to set up my services, cope with them over a long time, not just one night. So, I think some of the other methods may be more useful, ultimately, than the point time. And it's very costly. We heard Dennis talking about New York City. Thousands of people are in Chicago. Probably at least 1,000 people would have to be hired to do a reasonable point in time count. So it's extremely expensive. Or if they're volunteers, it's great, but it's still extremely expensive. You have to coordinate them, you have to train them. It's a very expensive operation to do a point in time count. The other thing, even despite the high cost, is it always gives you underestimates. Not just because it's a point prevalence, but you can never find all the homeless people. They're hiding all over the place. We've heard about the hidden homeless, or I talk about the marginally homeless. I'll give you some more examples of some of these kinds of people. Well, with the point in time count, you miss all of them. You only get the obvious homeless people who are in a shelter, or they're in obvious places on the streets where you see homeless people on a regular basis. Otherwise, you're not catching anybody. I think there's problems replicating this methodology across cities, states, nations, because different places may have different effort. You may have two cities with the same real prevalence of homelessness, but in one city they're really gung-ho, they have a lot of people out there, they're working real hard, they count a lot of homeless people because they do a good job, they count a lot of homeless people. Take city B, they're kind of lazy, they don't really know what they're doing, they don't hire enough people, they don't train them, and they get up with a small rate of homelessness. Why? Because they did a lousy job, not because homelessness is really different necessarily. So for this reason, we have limited value for international comparison, in my view. The service-based estimates that Dennis has advocated over the years are better in a number of ways. So you can estimate not only point prevalence, but annual or multi-year. You can't estimate lifetime prevalence. Maybe after these HMIS systems have been around for a lifetime, maybe we could start to do that, but For right now, the best we can do is maybe a 3-year prevalence, a 5-year prevalence, something like this. But that's still better than only point prevalence is the criterion. And I think Dennis has talked about some of these other things. The cost here is more in setting it up. But then also maintaining the system. It's very costly also. This is a very costly method. Count how many dollars, Dennis has figured this, for the US to develop this HMIS system. How much does it cost? It's a lot of money.
25 million a year.
Very, very much. Just per year. And then figure how many years it's been in establishing this. It's been 20 years in establishing it. That's a lot of money. And again, you get underestimates here. Dennis talked about it. The people who don't use services, however how many there are, we don't know for sure, but this is those people. Okay, the method I'm going to advocate is the household survey method. It's important to realize up front that this method also gives you underestimates. Of course, the numbers you get, the ones that Suzanne presented, which are similar to the ones I'm going to present for UK, you still get the highest estimates of any method here, even though they're all still underestimates. And why are there underestimates? You miss the currently homeless. We've talked about that. You also miss minors. In most cases, you're not interviewing children in these kinds of surveys. You're missing poor people who don't have telephones. In developed countries, that's like 5 or 10% of households don't have a telephone. And who are those people? They're very poor people who probably have a higher risk for homelessness. You don't know for sure. And of course, especially if you're asking like I do, have you ever been homeless? People might forget, they might not label what they experienced 10 years ago as being a homeless episode, so you have to do your best to try to beat the bushes here, but you're going to miss some. Well, why do you still get these high rates by this method? Well, 2 main reasons. One is it includes what I call the marginal homeless, not just the obvious homeless. So you get people, like we had one in London, actually, this is an interesting one. We ended up calling this guy literally homeless. He was, had lost his apartment, but he didn't lose his job. He still had his job. And what he would do is he would pretend to walk out with everybody else, and then he'd come back and he'd sleep under his desk. He was doing this for months. And then, he'd wake up early in the morning, go out and pretend to come in. For a couple of months, he was living under his desk. Now, you're never going to get that through the other methods. We ended up calling him literally homeless. You can just decide if you don't want to. But you get a lot of people whose house burned down and they slept in the park for 3 days. You're never going to get that one through the other methods. And there's a lot of people like this. People sleeping in their cars for months at a time because they can't afford an apartment. Again, there's lots of people like this and you miss them because they're scattered all over the place. They're like needles in a haystack. So you don't count them. Right? The other reason that you get high estimates here is because you can estimate lifetime prevalence. You saw Suzanne's slides that is very sensible. Lifetime prevalence is high. In UK, US, we're talking 7%, 8%, 9% of people, right? If you cut that down to a 5-year prevalence or a 3-year prevalence, whoops, it goes way down. And if you talk about point prevalence, that's teeny. And this is consistent with our understanding of homelessness, that it's an episodic thing, and at any point in time, there's not so many homeless people, but over a long time span, especially over lifetime, you get a lot more. So, some other advantages of the household survey method: very low cost, way less than the other methods. Even if you have very large samples, it's pretty cheap, especially for calling by telephone. If you're going door to door, that starts to be a little more expensive. You'll see in my study, the largest samples, national samples, are around 500. I'd like to have more. I think you can do other things if you have bigger samples, but 500 is good. You can easily replicate this across nations. I've been able to do it across 11 different nations. You'll see soon. Another advantage here is you're not only getting prevalence data, but you're also getting public opinion. What does the public think about homelessness? What should be done about it? Who are homeless people? What stereotypes does the public have about who homeless people are? All of these things you can do at the same time as you're finding out about prevalence. Okay, some problems. We'll talk about increasing numbers of households that only have a mobile phone. I'm one of these people. I don't need a fixed phone. I just have my mobile. A lot of you probably. It's growing numbers of people across the world don't have any fixed phones anymore. So it makes it difficult for the survey researchers to cope with this because it's kind of messy trying to represent mobile phone only households. We'll talk more about that this time. Another problem with this methodology is some people have trouble seeing the value of this method. I'm sure there's some of you here scratching your head saying, what, you're calling people on the telephone and asking them if they've been homeless? How can that work? How can that be right? And well, I'm going to continue to advocate for it. So here's some of our data. So far, 11 nations. We first did this in the US in 1994, when cell phones weren't an issue. There weren't very many. And we replicated in 2001. The Polish survey we've also replicated twice, 2005, 2014. The rest are single-only times. Some nations we've got both fixed and mobile phones that we call. In some places, like in Belgium, they've done a very good job of really trying to represent the population who are mobile-only households. And that's what we do, by the way. We use the fixed phone methodology to capture as many people as we can that way. And then we try to estimate how many households are mobile-only, and then we try to represent them as best we can. So you can see all these surveys, with the exception of the most recent Polish one and the Czech Republic survey that's almost done now, were completed basically between 1999 and about 2008. So like a 10-year span in the 2000s, basically. So we try to get a random sample of people. That's the goal. It's difficult to do, but we're using some of the same methods that you'll see. For example, now it's the presidential season in the U.S., so people might be calling you and asking, well, do you want to vote for Hillary Clinton or do you want to vote for Bush? And they're trying to call random samples of people to ask that question, right? Well, we're using some of those methods in the U.S. and in other nations where there's a high percentage of people with unlisted telephones. We're trying to fix phones now. You do what's called random digit dialing. It includes people with whose phones have been not listed in the directory. In other nations, so in the U.S., UK, I think this is Portugal, Canada, we use random digit dialing because there's a lot of people with unlisted phone numbers. In other countries like Germany, Belgium, Italy, there's not so many, so we could just use a national directory and randomly pick people from the national directory. Okay, here's the data that we have so far. We're still analyzing these data, and we still have the Czech Republic data coming in. You'll see the numbers vary from country to country. The sample size, it's mainly resources. In countries where we had more resources, like in Belgium, we got a nice big sample because they got a little grant. In the U.S., I have my own resources, so we can kind of get a little bigger samples there. It's really a matter of resources. I would like to have 1,000 in every country, if I could. Then I'd have a lot more confidence in these numbers, but let's just put aside this fact that these are relatively small samples and look at the rates here. The overall homelessness, by the way, is answering yes to a general question. In our survey, we have about 30 items that are kind of developing rapport with the person, asking them general things. Do you think homelessness problem is growing in your city? Is it growing in America? Do you give money to homeless panhandlers? Have you ever panhandled yourself? We have a whole series of questions just to develop some rapport, get some data too. And then we have the key question, which is something like this in most nations and languages. Has there ever been a time in your life when you were in a precarious housing situation? For example, we'll give a few examples, or you felt maybe you were homeless. Something like that. That's the general opening question. You say yes to that, that's what I call overall homelessness. So it's homelessness and precarious housing, if you will, together, right? But then if you said yes to that, we have a whole series of other questions that ask you about, have you slept in a train station? How about a bus station? How about in a park? How about in your car? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we also ask some things about being doubled up. Did you ever sleep in a friend or relative's house, but you could only stay there temporarily? Right? Those people get excluded from the literal homeless. In the literal homeless, we're talking about the kind of definition that was presented in our last thing that many of us researchers agree on as what is literal homelessness. You're on the streets, you're sleeping in train stations, you're in a homeless shelter, this kind of situation. So that's what I tend to focus on, is that column, and comparing the nations. Who are the winners here? We got the US, we got the UK, and we got Canada. We're the winners in this race to have a lot of hope.
It's not Canada.
Hey.
It's rough there. But then who are the losers? We got Germany, we got France, we got Japan. I'm not sure we can trust the sample size of it. But for sure, Germany and France are low, around 2%. Then the other nations are kind of medium. So you got Belgium, you got Italy, you got Poland, you got Portugal, with 3 or 4% lifetime prevalence. By the way, one thing about this lifetime prevalence, we can bump it up if we talk about the possibility of future homelessness, because this is only you on your telephone. Have you ever been in the past homeless? It doesn't say, well, all of you have an opportunity in the future to be homeless. So if we project into the lifetime, the rates for nations like UK, US and Canada are about 10%. The lifetime risk to become homeless in America and UK and Canada is probably around 10%. So we made these estimates. So you get really high numbers here. We could talk more about what these mean. But now let me add in the mobile-only households. And basically the numbers are the same, except for Belgium. The people with mobile phones only in Belgium had a much higher risk of homelessness than people with fixed phones in their houses. We could talk more about why that is, but the good news is, for most of the nations, it was about the same, whether you talk about the mobile-only households or fixed phone households. This is the sort of next direction, looking at the first 8 nations that we've covered. We are now wondering, what might explain those different rates of prevalence. So we're looking at the literal homelessness prevalence that I just showed you, right, that column. And we're correlating, these are correlations with the sample size is 8. There's 8 subjects here in this analysis. And we get some huge correlations. I never got correlations like this. When we start to correlate national characteristics with national rates of literal homelessness, there's some big factors here. Now this, you can look at the sympathy index, by the way, is our own survey, where we took a variety of items, things like, when you think about homeless people, you feel sad. You think you would pay more taxes to help homeless people, etc. Items like this, that's compassionate. The nations that are more compassionate, like Germany and France, have lower homelessness rates. The ones that are less compassionate, like the US, UK, Canada, have higher rates of literal homelessness. The Gini index, so we may know what this is the generalized index of national income. When you talk about the top 1% having such a huge amount of the income, well, the Gini is the traditional measure among sociologists and others to measure this. So in the case of Gini, if you have a king who has all the wealth, nobody has anything, just the one guy. Gini is 1.0. On the other hand, you have a nation where everybody has exactly the same income, we all make exactly the same amount, Gini is 0. And then you have in between that. The US is the highest among those nations we just saw, but UK and Canada are pretty high. And some of the other nations, like Germany and Italy and France, are lower on the Gini index. And you can see some of the other factors that are correlating with these rates of homelessness. Okay, I think I'm going to end right there.
Okay, I think we got a good flavor of a variety of different approaches in counting and measuring and getting some idea of the quality of homelessness in some very different settings. So open it up for questions.
Hi, I'm Graham Chippell, University of Newcastle. Could I just make 3 points? I have some points on the previous plenary, which might interest the people here, but I'll ask your permission before I go on to that. I think one of the reasons why older people in Britain might not have had any experience of homelessness was that when they were young, there wasn't much. I lived in Sheffield in 1967 to 72. And I used to walk around the streets at night because I was a student. I had to cover quite large distances. I don't think I ever saw anybody sleeping on the streets. If you do that now, you'll find lots of people. And it started in the Thatcher-Reagan time. It was a policy decision to have homeless people. And we could stop it. We could. But we make up our minds not to. And they're the people who suffer. It was interesting talking about censuses. I've just worked in 7 African countries in the last 5 years, asking much the same question to fairly senior officials in governments, including census officers. And one of the things census officers say about housing data, which is what I'm interested about, is that we don't know what to collect. This is Africa. We don't know what to collect. And also, they don't know how to analyse it. So in one country I found that instead of telling us how many people in a city lived in 2 rooms, they told us how many people who live in 2 rooms live in that city. What percentage? I mean, what use is that? So they don't even know which way round to put the data or even the questions to ask. And I think in many countries in the world, certainly developing countries, people need to lobby the census office to include questions about housing and homelessness in the next census. Because the census people are as lost as everybody else about what they should know. And I've liaised between housing departments, say in Liberia, and the census office in Liberia, and they never talk to each other. So I think there's an issue there. I think doubling up is a real problem in certainly in lots of Africa. People might not admit to doubling up. People have renters, but the renters say, oh no, we're relatives, because they know that it's actually not legal for them to be renters. And there may be quite a legal thing or a stigma thing about doubling up. And people can always pretend just to be relatives. So I think that might be quite difficult to find, who's doubling up. Also, in some cultures, doubling up is absolutely normal. And so, again, can those people be counted as homeless?
I'm going to, just to get many questions, are there any comments?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, you're
Yeah, I'm quite impressed by the amount of work. It's very interesting because you have a lot of information and it's really very accurate or as much as it possible. I want to share just another method we have developed more on the ground, really for people on the ground who need to know which is the population we should cover. So it's not based on talking to people. It's just based on what you see and what you see during the day. And it's based on a score, like in medicine we use a lot of scores. So it's 3 aspects of a person. It's her body, her clothes, and her behavior. And each of these teams has from 0 to 3. And if you are on the total, you are under 6. This means the person should be, you should go into contact with the person. So it's very easy to do because it's during the day. And it's a measure of the lack of self-esteem of the person. And it's most probably correlated with the fact that the person or is in a precarious living or has no living. Just a system you can use very quickly, very easily. We have done it in the past here in Chicago to have an idea. Okay, and for people working on the ground, we want to know very quickly approximately which population they should cover. It's quite easy. You can train people in 2 hours to use that, and then you have a little card with them to remind them what they should look at and how they should number it, and it's quite easy.
Thank you. Any comments? Yeah, so I'm going to, if we can kind of keep, there's lots of people, unfortunately we have limited time, so if we can keep the questions and comments relatively brief.
So I'm Norwegian Mulvern. I'm at the University of
California and Los Angeles. So my question's kind of at a broader level. So once you have these numbers, could you tell us how they make a difference? And really, I guess because this counting is expensive, so I guess the question that I have, can you give us examples of where numbers have made a difference, especially in terms of leading to more housing?
For example, the Finland example is a wonderful example where you have a continuous, every year you have a count on the number of homeless people, and they have made it a target to end long-term homelessness. They have the data. They have had a target of halving homelessness in a certain period. They have achieved that. I think that's a very good example where you really targeted policies have been supported by a continuous staff collection. You can really see the effects of policies, but that's not done with lifetime prevalence. That's something which you have to do with point in time or very short prevalence times. But you can measure policies, and if you really develop a good policy, that's very helpful to have the data.
And I mean, just to follow on from that one, I did a comparison with this work where I compared what was going on in Finland and Ireland. Countries of quite similar size, they put a fairly similar amount of money into tackling homelessness. In Finland, they had this very rigorous approach to measuring the phenomenon and change over time, and they had a very effective, successful policy. In Ireland, they set a target, but there was nothing put in place to measure whether that target was met, and so on. So the incentives for actually delivering were that much less because it wasn't transparent. So I think that's the Finland and the Ireland comparison is a very good example. In terms of the actual household survey type approaches that we've been talking about, I think where they have value is in twofold. Certainly the one that Bob and I were talking about, in terms of if you look at overall rates, it tells you something about what we're saying as well about the potential of different countries to generate homelessness, and that poses some very interesting questions about why are some countries much higher than others. And I think Paul suggested what some of those issues might be. Myself and also Lars Benjaminson is here from Denmark. It's done some very interesting analysis too, looking at the ways that different welfare states and different housing systems generate different rates of homelessness. And having this kind of comparative data provides something very powerful, I think, to frame that discussion. Because otherwise we're guessing that it's higher in the US and the UK than it is in Finland and Germany. Having some hard data on that is extraordinarily powerful. The second thing is if you can link it with the social distribution of homelessness, which is what you can do certainly with the household survey type model we're doing, you can look at causal inferences, and that's what we're doing in terms of the data within the UK, looking at the relative reports on labour market and housing market factors, poverty and individual level kind of support issues. And again, that's very important and useful in terms of developing policy. So I think they have different kinds of purposes, and different measures serve horses for courses serve different purposes. But I think there's examples of them having been useful, and more importantly for us, I think ways in which they can be useful in the future, which is what I think we should work towards.
First, Paul, I would like to know, because you use a sample, I would like to know if you control the sample by variables as such, sex, income, and second, if you have an estimate of the sample value, because 6.1 depends on the and now to Isabel. Isabel, what is your experience with training, selecting training volunteers? Because my experience is very difficult, and to maintain the quality of the work, it's a very huge problem. I'd like to hear.
We went first. Good. Well, in terms of controlling for sex and gender and age and so forth, they're representative of nations. Because we're doing random sampling and we end up with more or less random samples. We've looked at that. We don't have, sample sizes are small. We can't really look at predictors of who's likely to be homeless or not, because even if 500 people at best, we have thousands. If 36,000, we could do that kind of thing. We could predict who is most at risk. But I don't feel comfortable getting into that kind of analysis with 200, 300, 400, 500 people in each nation. But comparing the rates, at least the highest rates to the lowest rates, they're different from each other. And I don't have confidence intervals that I've computed and put up here, but there's a significant difference, for example, between those the top nations and the bottom nations for sure. However, how you want to statistically analyze it, there are reliable differences, even with relatively small samples. But to go beyond that, I don't feel comfortable doing analyses that split those samples up that much further.
There was a
She has a question.
First of all, I think that the key is to know that the perfect things are enemy of good things. All volunteers. And also, we divided in groups, so we will always take care that in every group there are somebody who is expert in work with homeless. The training was 4 hours and was taken a lot of sensitive things, more than technical, for the volunteers. I think that was our view to do that.
it was a brief reflection in the interest of trying to look across developing world, and it meets with Graham's point, because I love Paul's mobile phone or survey via phone, and there's huge potential to transfer that to the developing world, which for us in the developed world we might assume wasn't possible. We've just done some work in Addis with informal economy work, so 96% had a mobile phone. It's probably higher rates. So the poorest have access.
When I first started this work, the developing countries couldn't really do it because the phone coverage was so minimal. But now, it's a whole different matter. You can do the survey in the developing countries because everybody has a telephone now. You just have to figure out, again, the sampling design is a little more difficult with the, and there's sort of two problems with the mobiles over. One is estimating the number of households that are represented because there's all these different companies and so forth. It's sort of hard to get a household sample that is representative of the nation. But you also have this problem of multiple phones in each household. So, many of you, I'm sure, have kids, and there might be 5 or 6 cell phones in each household in many places. You have to account for that too. That's a different problem. But it can be done.
Gracias, Juan Martín de México.
Juan Martín from Mexico.
Gracias por los aportes.
Thank you for all the information.
Tendría 3 preguntas.
I will have 3 questions right now.
En las aproximaciones que han hecho, se ha explorado la garantía de derechos humanos.
Have you guys explored the human rights warranties?
Es decir, son considerados como ciudadanos y en
Are you
consecuencia
considering them as
acceden a
citizens?
apoyos
Therefore,
y políticas de inclusión social.
do they have access to support and to social policies?
En segundo término, si también hay experiencia sobre la eficiencia de estas políticas
Is there any experience in regards to the
para lograr
efficiency
que
of those
salgan de la
policies
calle o que no retornen
in order for them
al
to
espacio público?
get out of the homelessness and for them to not return to be homeless anymore?
Y un tercer elemento quizás es más complejo, pero la discriminación estructural o las condiciones que perpetúan la exclusión social.
The third aspect, and maybe it's a little bit more complex aspect, is in regards to structural discrimination and all the consequences that the structural discrimination can carry with it.
Quizás esto es más visible cuando ustedes hacen la pregunta de los 6 últimos años o los 10 últimos años, si se han hecho algún tipo de exploración. Y felicito el trabajo bastante interesante que han realizado.
Perhaps this is more visible when you talk about the surveys that you've done within the past 5 years, within the past 6 years, and I congratulate for all the work that you guys have been doing.
from Chile, that they had the human rights approach in the last count. So,
Bueno, desde nuestro punto de vista siempre ha sido una vulneración a los derechos humanos en cuanto ha estado... Oh, sorry.
No, that's fine. From our point of view, it's always been a violation to human rights.
Por lo tanto, se parte desde aquella premisa. Pero
Therefore,
por
you start
supuesto
from
que
that
tenemos en
premise.
cuenta de que existe la vulneración de los derechos.
But you have to start from that point that there is a vulnerability of human rights.
Y de hecho, bueno, comentar algo de lo que decía antes él, que el catastro nosotros nos dio como resultado que al menos más del 30% de las personas había estado en servicios servicios nacionales de menores.
In
Por
regards
lo tanto, claro,
In regards to the question that the gentleman over there said, the survey indicates that at least 30% of the minors were or had been into government services already.
entonces entendiendo que estamos haciendo mal el trabajo desde que es un trabajo que tiene que ser complementario y que se está haciendo desde los menores de edad, estamos teniendo dificultades que hacen tener una mayor cantidad de población en calle.
Which lead us to understand that we have been doing a bad job from the moment that they are children, because that carries on and makes us have a larger street population from the time they're children until they get to the adulthood.
I think it's probably a good time to wrap it up here, and thank you for the panel. I think they will be available if you have any other questions. Thank you all for attending.